So, news this week from the Queen, Prince Philip, the Duke of Cambridge, the Duchess of Cornwall, and Harry and Meghan. So we've got a bit more variety this week.
Lots more variety this week.
Variety in terms of the number of royal engagements and the things that we can talk about on this podcast. So hello, welcome to ITV's Royal Rota. We're back again. We've been out and about. Actually, we saw a royal yesterday, which we'll talk about.
I know. They're slowly coming back to work,
Yes.
aren't they, from their summer holidays.
And one of the things that we said at the end of last week's podcast was that we were quite excited about the fact that we were going on this visit with Camilla to see some dogs. Both of us are big fans of dogs, and we're also, it was a potentially significant trial in terms of coronavirus. So it was a great visit. We had a good day.
We had a lovely
We'll bring you
day.
all the news from that.
Yep.
And as we said, lots of other royals.
Not just Harry and Meghan.
Because, unsurprisingly, we were criticised, or my social media, why do you keep harassing / obsessing / whatever else it is some people on Twitter use, that we talk too much about them. Last week they were done because the royals hadn't done anything else. This week, here I go again, having to justify covering Harry and Meghan. This week there are lots of other royals to talk about, so we will. Right.
Shall I do the rundown?
The Robinsons' Royal Rundown, go.
So, as you say, the Duchess of Cornwall went to visit the medical detection dogs, and these dogs are in training to see if they can trace coronavirus. So this could be potentially game-changing for all sorts of industries.
So said the Duchess herself.
So said the Duchess herself, but it could be potentially massive for the likes of the travel industry, airports, but also sports stadiums. It could be used in schools, universities, anywhere where there's lots of people. The Duke of Cambridge made a visit to Belfast to mark Emergency Services Day.
Another thing we couldn't tell you about last week, because particularly with Northern Ireland, there's always
as
issues
always,
with.
We
Yes.
wouldn't have announced that anyway, but with COVID at the moment, we're not announcing anything in advance. We found out that the Queen and the Duke of Edinburgh are going to leave Balmoral Castle and they're going to move privately to Sandringham, where they're going to stay together, and then the Queen will return to Windsor rather than Buckingham Palace, and she will commute basically from Windsor to Buckingham Palace, where COVID permitting, she will begin to carry out audiences and engagements.
I was going to say, you better keep that brief, otherwise we'll have nothing left to talk about when we come to talk about that.
Harry and Meghan have repaid this figure, 2.4 million, has been sort of controversial and hanging over them for a long time. The figure of taxpayers' money used to renovate Frogmore. So they've done this big Netflix deal. They've now repaid that.
Okay, lots to talk about there.
And finally, Princess Beatrice's wedding dress that was designed by
Sir Norman Hartnell.
Perfect. Is going on display. So you must be excited about that.
I'm very excited about it. And given that I wrote an article about it, which you can see on our website if you want, at itv.com/news, it had some sleeves added to it, I seem to recall, from the press release from the Royal Collection Trust. And there was something about Diamante things in it too. So we could talk about that in great detail later. I'm looking forward to that. So where should we start?
Camilla.
Dogs.
You don't normally let me decide.
Well, I'm not. I was talking about the Queen then. So, I mean, you pretty much told us the whole story just now, but quite interesting that they were giving us some guidance on what the Queen was going to do. You'll all know that she's at Balmoral, has been there since she moved up with Prince Philip from Windsor. She always stays up there at this time of year. There's normally the Braemar Gathering, the Highland Games.
Which is normally the first weekend in September.
Which was last weekend?
So...
Kind of, yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
but
they would normally, always see them.
But they're leaving early this year, and then they're heading south, as we say in London.
Yeah, I guess it's been a very different stay for the Queen at Balmoral this year. You know, she's not been able to go to the traditional Braemar Gathering. They normally have the Gillies Ball, which is the Scottish dancing that the royals do, and members of staff working on the estate. Well, interestingly,
the Scottish government said today, just as the English government said yesterday, that they are limiting gatherings to a maximum of 6 people. So once you've got the Queen, basically we worked out that the Queen and Prince Philip can't go and visit William and Kate and all their children, because that makes 7. Obviously, they've got 3 kids, William and Kate, Queen and Philip. So these kind of things are suddenly a bit more difficult, and obviously the royal family has to lead by example. So we're presuming gatherings of 6 ain't going to happen. No Gillies Ball.
So a very different visit, and we would normally see them stay up at Balmoral probably until the beginning of October. So this is an early departure for them. and Balmoral is being opened to visitors. So they're clearing off and going to Sandringham, where they will stay at Wood Farm, which is where Prince Philip has been spending a lot of time since he retired in 2017.
It means at Balmoral Castle they can start taking money again for tickets.
Urgently needed money, I
Yes,
think.
and they can do, I don't know whether you'd still be able to do that tour that we did of the Balmoral estate in the back of that Land Rover. So probably because of social distancing.
We did a safari tour around the estate to get to see it. It was
because of social distancing,
amazing.
You probably won't be allowed to do that anymore.
No.
So Wood Farm. Wood Farm is the small.
Well,
cottage?
it's 5-bedroom. I mean, it's
okay. It's a
small for a royal.
Yeah, small for a royal house, where the Duke of Edinburgh spends his retirement,
Yes.
and did do so until just before Easter when he relocated with the Queen to Windsor. And the Queen's going to spend some time with him there rather than open up the big old Sandringham house, which they do every Christmas. They're all going to squash into Wood Farm.
Yeah, she does sometimes go and stay at Wood Farm with him, but it is a much more sort of low key than the big the big house that they also have on the estate.
It might be advisable that none of them tries to sort of like drive across that busy road, which, as you remember, when the Duke of Edinburgh crashed his car, it's on one side of this busy road, where Sandringham House is on the other side, and that's where that particular accident happened. Not that I'm making light of it, because it was a very serious incident. Nevertheless, I wouldn't advise either the Queen or the Duke attempt that over the next few weeks. So it's from there. What we don't know at the moment is whether Prince Philip is going to stay there to continue his retirement. 99 now, as you well know, given the picture. Probably worth showing you that picture again of the Queen and Prince Philip at Windsor Castle. 99 as he is now, we don't know whether he's going to stay there or go to Windsor with the Queen.
Yeah, and actually over the last few months they've spent a lot of time together, more time than they have probably in years, because social bubble at Windsor Castle, and then Balmoral, and now Sandringham. They've spent a lot of time together.
And as a lot of husbands and wives will tell you, that was sometimes a good thing and sometimes a more challenging thing. So,
I can imagine.
So we presume that the Queen and Prince Philip must at least have been getting on very well to want to continue being with one another when they go to Sandringham.
And the Queen would normally, when she comes back from Balmoral, she would normally, for the sort of autumn, head back to Buckingham Palace.
Yes.
So that's also different, that she's going to stay at Windsor Castle, where things obviously worked quite well for her isolated.
Yeah, and it's going to be very much a home and office thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, the home is Windsor Castle, which is kind of the place she likes being in any case. And then Buckingham Palace becomes the office, and she will commute to the office, presumably not on the train from Windsor via Slough Station, which we've done a few times ourselves.
Oh yeah, we have.
But she will either helicopter, one imagines, or drives the car. But that's going to be her situation. So that's what we know. It happens next week. They do the move from Scotland to England next week. So that's the Queen done. Dogs. Let's do dogs next, because we had a lot of fun doing dogs.
These dogs are remarkable, aren't they? I mean, they really are incredibly impressive creatures.
Well, let's have a look at Asher. So if you're watching on YouTube, we're going to show you Asher. If you're listening to this on one of our podcast platforms, then, well, go and find the pictures on our social media pages. But this is Asher, who is doing a smell test of a few samples in a room. The first lot they showed him had no coronavirus in it. The second lot, they switched one of the samples, and the second lot, Asher went up and immediately found the COVID sample. Now, the interesting thing about Asher, a Cocker Spaniel, who I did my first ever television live with an animal the other day, more on that in a minute, is that he's only been doing this for a couple of days. He's been trained, this was day 2, I think, of his training, and immediately this dog can smell COVID. It has an odour, he smelt it.
So medical detection dogs often, for this sort of thing, work with gun dogs, because they've got a good sense of smell, they're very bright, they're quick learners, and they already know that dogs can trace odours. They've had success with cancer, diabetes, Parkinson's. So the theory,
malaria as well, more recently.
The theory is the same, that if a disease has an odour, the dogs can smell it. So COVID has an odour, so the dog should be able to smell it and detect it.
What they're lacking at the moment is samples, and we'll tell you in a minute. Like if you're going to take a COVID test because you think you've got it, what they actually need is some more samples, and we'll tell you why in a minute, why you need to wear a face mask and a pair of nylon socks. Nylon socks apparently are better.
Nylon, yes.
Did you hear that yesterday? Were we
Yeah.
having that conversation? We were. Right, let's have a listen to what Camilla thinks of it. Now, we know that Camilla loves this charity, Medical Detection Dogs. We saw her actually introduce the Queen to this charity 18 months ago at Buckingham Palace. This is what Camilla thinks of the COVID trials, which she said were potentially game-changing, not just for the UK, but for the world.
I just knew there was something very special about these dogs. And as we've seen today with COVID, you know, and how quickly they're learning to sniff this out, it will be a game-changing moment for this country and the world.
There we go. Potentially saves thousands of lives, she said. And I suppose the interesting thing with this, and let's just show you some more pictures at the moment of these dogs when they put them into like an airport setting. They lined up a few people, either in a waiting room or in a queue for a plane, pretend plane, and they gave one of them this training odour, and the dogs were running up and down. And as you can see, if you're watching this, just quite how successful that was.
Yeah, when they find the odour, they...
That was Marley, wasn't it, the second one?
Marley, yeah. Sits, wags the tail very quickly, and then gets a treat. Marley likes a tennis ball, so
yeah.
The treat.
You either get a toy or you get
a
bit of food, whatever your thing is as a dog.
Yeah. And each dog, it can screen up to 250 people in an hour. So this could be, if it's rolled out and sort of, expanded, it could screen a lot of people very fast.
Particularly planes, for example, coming in from, say, one of the Greek Isles. Zakynthos Zante was one of the islands that was under a lot of close inspection recently, and dogs could be used, therefore, to sniff out all the passengers on that plane. And interestingly, they can tell whether or not someone's got coronavirus even before the symptoms have become obvious to the patient or the passenger. So if someone's asymptomatic, the dog can smell COVID. I mean, I think this thing's got potential, as Camilla said, potentially game-changing.
Potentially game-changing.
Yeah.
And I mean, I suppose because they know it works with other diseases, there should be no reason why this theory can't be applied to COVID.
Yes, yeah. And Claire Guest, who is the CEO of Medical Detection Dogs, tells a very interesting story that she founded the charity after one of her own dogs essentially alerted her to a breast cancer and a lump that she had that was actually quite deep inside that a doctor would not necessarily have found. And the dog was able to smell that and kept sort of pouring at her to let her know that this happened. And Claire, how did Claire refer to the dogs? She said they were biosensors with waggy tails and fluffy coats.
Yeah, she did,
okay,
which is a really nice way of putting it.
This is Claire Guest. Have a listen.
These are biosensors with waggy tails and fluffy coats. So if they can detect it from a tiny piece of sock that was worn by somebody 3 weeks ago, who has COVID-19, then the chances of them being able to smell it from a person that walks past is huge.
It's actually really high.
So this is really exciting.
So all potentially very exciting, all positive. Camilla loves to give this charity a lot of her time. It's very close to her heart, but they're missing one thing.
They are. To train these dogs, they need samples so that the dogs have something to practice with and to learn what coronavirus smells like. So they are appealing, and the Duchess appealed yesterday for samples. So if you have a coronavirus symptoms and you're booked in for a test, or you've had a test in the last 24 hours, they would like you to volunteer to help them.
Yes. So what you need to do, and actually the best person to explain this is Professor James Logan, who's from the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, who are leading this trial. You can either go to, I think it's called coviddogs.com. No, virusdogs.com. It's called virusdogs.com is their website, or you can just contact him or London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine on social media, and they will send you out a pack, essentially a face mask, a T-shirt and a pair of socks. Nylon apparently is very good at sort of maintaining the scent of coronavirus. You wear that just not for just a few hours, isn't it?
The mask for 3 hours, and
Yeah.
that picks up, I guess, condensation and
Must pick up your droplets
from your breath, and then you wear the nylon socks and the shirt for 12 hours.
Right, and then you send it all in to them, and that's how they train the dogs. They've got 10 samples, they need 375, so basically anyone watching or listening to this in the UK, if you're getting a coronavirus test, particularly if your test turns out to be positive, you need to get in touch. Have a listen to what James Logan had to say.
You know, we've known for a very long time that when you have an infection, it often changes the way you smell. We know this for cancers, we know it for Parkinson's, we've even shown it for malaria very recently. And in fact, you know, hundreds of years ago, people would diagnose people just by smelling them. So it's a well-known fact that infections change the way we smell, and it's very likely that the same happens with COVID-19. And the good thing about dogs is that they're incredibly good at smelling and incredibly good at learning smells. So if they can learn the smell of COVID-19, we could have a really powerful diagnostic on our hands. I've seen what these dogs can do. You know, if we can prove that the dogs can do this successfully, this could be really quite profoundly impactful. You know, if we can have a dog screening 250 people an hour at an airport or other ports of entry or even places of work, we could change the way that we're handling this pandemic. So we're very hopeful that this is going to work.
And here is a picture of me and Asher trying to do a live on yesterday's lunchtime news on ITV, and he was very good. He didn't run off until the very end.
He was
stayed
so
there
well
for
behaved
the whole time. So all this thing they say about working with animals and children on television, I think is just absolute nonsense. I think it's all fine.
You should have got Asher in to do the podcast.
Yeah, actually, Asher could have actually been much more entertaining than any of us could be. I particularly like, if you look at this shot that's on my Twitter feed, I particularly like his haircut. He's got a really good haircut.
Got beach hair, hasn't
got
he?
Slightly sun bleached at the beach in Cornwall, where he was apparently last week on holiday. So bless him, and good luck to everyone at Medical Detection Dogs and the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine on that vitally important
And Durham University
project.
are also working on the project as well.
And Durham University. So, while Camilla was there in, where was this, Buckinghamshire we were yesterday, just outside London in the UK, Prince William took himself off to one of the 4 nations of the UK. He was in Northern Ireland.
He was in Northern Ireland and he was meeting emergency responders on 999 Day. So he was there thanking them for the work they've done, particularly over COVID, but also to discuss the importance of mental health support for those in our emergency services.
Yeah, there were a couple of things this week. There was Air Ambulance Week, and we know that you'll know that Prince William was an air ambulance pilot for a good while in East Anglia before he became what is known as a full-time working member of the royal family. It was also 999 Day, wasn't it? I think
that was when he was.
That was the day he was there.
Yeah.
And this is the speech he gave to thank emergency service workers or first responders, however you talk about them, about the amazing job that they do, and also the challenges that they have, not just on their physical but on their mental health.
It's great to be here with everyone today, as socially distanced as you are. Obviously today is 999 Day. It's a day when we come together to celebrate and thank the 2 million people, just like all of you in this room, who put their own lives on the line time and time again to keep the rest of us safe and healthy. This has already been an extraordinary year. The months ahead will no doubt be uncertain and at some point scary. But thanks to the dedication and sacrifice of those of you working across the emergency services and in the NHS, I count myself and others in this country very fortunate. Your dedication is not only apparent when we are faced with a global pandemic. Each and every day, people from teams across the blue light community are called to the scenes of dreadful incidents. Just last week in Birmingham, ambulance and police workers turned up to a horrendous incident and provided critical care support to the most vulnerable. But as you care for us in our time of need, so too must we ensure that we are there for you when you need it the most. We must ensure you have the right support in place each and every day. And I know firsthand that even in routine circumstances, those of you on the front line can face immense challenges that can naturally have a significant impact on both your physical and your mental health.
So that was a busy day for them. Do you know what I noticed that the Kensington Palace did for the first time on their Instagram feed was 15 seconds video. So they put up a little very quick montage. So go to, is it at Kensington Royal, and you'll see this very quick 15-second, this is what William's been up to today.
And this visit, I think, is building on the work that Kate and William have been doing a lot of throughout the pandemic. Do you remember back in April they pledged to make supporting the mental health of our frontline workers a priority for them? So this is we've seen them launch Our Frontline, and the Royal Foundation announced a nearly £2 million fund to those 10 leading mental health charities, and included in that was charities working with emergency services. So they really are committed to this, and it's something that they, plan to work on for sort of the months ahead as we hopefully come out of this pandemic.
Talking of William and Kate, are we any nearer to Kate's Hold Still project?
Yep, so Hold Still
we spoke about some of the finalists last week, didn't we?
We did, yeah. That launches digitally on the 14th of September, which is Monday.
Monday, right, okay. So we'll get some more pictures from the UK lockdown that Kate and others from the National Portrait Gallery have chosen as the finalists. What about Beatrice's dress?
You're saving Harry and Meghan for the end, aren't you?
Oh, right at the very end. I feel like they need to be placed somewhere where we won't get criticised for talking about them.
So Princess Beatrice's wedding dress is going to go on display at Windsor Castle from the 24th of September. And I think
Just
this is...
as Meghan's did, yes.
As Meghan's did, and
Eugenie's
did.
Yeah.
But I think this is particularly lovely because obviously Princess Beatrice had to have her wedding sort of behind closed doors. No members of the public got to see her.
Not just for COVID, but obviously because of that other thing going on, her issues, this controversy surrounding her father, Prince Andrew.
So I think this is a nice chance for the public to go and see this dress that was once formerly worn by the Queen.
So the Queen wore this dress 3 times in the 1960s.
Yep.
Let me see if I can remember all 3 times.
Okay.
One was at a state dinner in Rome when she was on a state visit to Italy, and I think it was at the British Embassy in Rome. The second was 1960. One.
Yep.
The second was it the same year or 1 year later at the premiere of Lawrence of Arabia?
62.
Yep. in Leicester Square in London. And the third time she wore it is completely gone out of my head. Something like 1966 at some sort of ball.
No, State Opening of Parliament.
State Opening of Parliament, there we are. Sorry, I couldn't remember all 3.
That was pretty good. And Beatrice's dress, as you slightly alluded to,
has been refashioned.
Slightly altered by Angela
working
Kelly.
with Angela Kelly, the Queen's dresser, and the British designer
Stuart Parvin.
who the Queen likes. So look, I am the new
pretty
fashion
good.
expert. I might go and get a job on the newspaper as a fashion correspondent now. Sleeves were added.
They were added,
apparently.
Yes.
And something else was taken in to make it.
Well, I think it was
streamlined.
just fitted to.
It's all on that press release.
It's on the press
Royal
release.
Collection Trust. You could just read it
I
out.
could just read this out.
Read about
actually,
how it's been refashioned. Call them.
Well, I think you've said it.
No. Much more detail on
The
there.
full skirted silhouette was softened to give a more contemporary, simplified shape, and the underskirt and petticoats were recreated and bound with silk tulle.
Yep, I definitely thought when I saw that dress it was a softened version of what the Queen
I could keep
wore.
going.
I'll tell you, it was quite long. I was reading through that press
It
release
goes on and on, doesn't it?
when I was working from home, thinking, does everyone need this level of detail?
It'll also feature her wedding shoes made by Valentino.
Yes.
Are you a fan of Valentino, Shippy?
Yes, big fan. Wearing some right now. And that article that I wrote.
Actually, some of our listeners might like to know that those wedding shoes she wore to the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge's wedding in 2011.
There we are.
There we are.
The article that I wrote is on our website. Have a look if you want to see how accurate or otherwise it is.
Was it a copy and paste job of the press release?
No, it was definitely my own words, mostly. Anyhow,
okay.
So go see the dress, Windsor Castle. Windsor Castle was obviously reopened to visitors, and that's one of the things you can now go see. And it will be able to be open, even though the Queen's living there, because she's in her private residence at Windsor Castle. You can still go visit if you are anywhere.
Yeah, you won't be having tea with the Queen, I'm afraid, but you can see the dress.
No, but when she's there, you can't see what's called the semi-state rooms at the very back, isn't it? That overlook the Eastern Terrace or whatever it's called. Those manicured lawns at the back that we did something on recently because somebody designed them.
They've opened up the East Terrace, haven't they?
You might, if you look hard through the window, you might see the Queen taking her tea. Right, so can I do any other story on the royals before I do Harry and Meghan? Have I missed anything? No? Right, Harry and Meghan time. If you don't want to hear about it, time to turn off. If you do want to hear about it, time to listen in carefully. So a lot of people know about it. I mean, rightly or wrongly, the single biggest item of expenditure in last year's annual report and accounts from Buckingham Palace, the sovereign grant, written by the Keeper of the Privy Purse, the guy with the old-fashioned title. The single biggest expenditure, item number 1 on that list, was £2.4 million, which was spent on the renovation of Frogmore Cottage, which was where Harry and Meghan were living at the time, or about to move into.
Were living, and it was renovated
Yes.
and changed from 5 different
Yes.
flats into one
And
house.
needed renovation.
Needed renovation.
Yep.
A lot of work doing to it, but 2.4 million is a figure that has slightly haunted them since
Yes.
they departed.
And it's referred to as taxpayers' money, but let's be clear, it comes from the sovereign grant. The sovereign grant is the amount of money taken from a share of the profits of the Crown estate, and some of it goes to the UK government. The other bit is siphoned off to pay for the royal family's
and
official
to, you know,
duties.
used for things like renovating
Yes.
properties like Frogmore.
And Buckingham Palace, which is being renovated at a much higher price than 2.4 million. Nevertheless, the single biggest item of expenditure in this particular report was the 2.4 million. When Harry and Meghan left or did their deal, what is known as, we can tell you, as the Sandringham Agreements, the thing that they signed in January or February? January, wasn't it? Was that they would pay the money back. And they were paying it back at a sort of in instalments.
Yeah, and it was reported that those instalments were around £18,000 a month, which to get to 2.4 million is going to take over a decade.
Yep.
And we now
Although
know.
they would get there quicker than if I were paying it back monthly.
Yeah,
so,
mate.
so 11 years is not too bad for 2.4 million. But hey, given that they're not living there, it's quite a big piece of expenditure. So
It does remain, even though they
Yes.
have set up a new life in America, it does remain their UK
the
residence.
UK residence, and it remains a property of the Crown estate, or the Queen's house, one of her houses.
But I think last week we were talking a lot about how they just signed this whopping great Netflix deal. They were going to produce all sorts of things from documentaries to children's programming for Netflix, and they'd signed a deal that's reported at being anywhere between $100 to $150 million. So they're making some
That's
serious...
gone up since last week. Last week we said 50 to 100 million, but you think some of the estimates have been raised up since then?
Yeah. So they're making some serious money.
Yeah.
And, you know, they can now clear this.
Well, they've paid it off in a lump sum. So we were told it's being paid back to the sovereign grant, whether by bank transfer or cheque or cash, put in a bag and flown over the Atlantic on a pigeon. I have no idea, but it's been paid back in one lump sum. And also they've announced Team Sussex, who continues to work with us, despite what some people tell me on Twitter, that they've banned all UK media. It's not true. Team Sussex and their official office, both in London and in Los Angeles, is still working with UK broadcasters like ourselves and a couple of select newspapers. The people they've stopped working with entirely is the UK tabloid newspapers. Just like to put that on, because that's something I have to correct and amend on Twitter on a very regular basis. So they still work with us, and they told us in the conversations that they always have with us that they've stopped taking money from Prince Charles as well.
Yeah, so Prince Charles has been helping them from his private income as they sort of settle into this new life away from being senior working members of the royal family. But Harry and Meghan set out on a path to become financially independent.
They are.
And they have achieved that. They've paid back Frogmore, and they're no longer taking any money from Dad. And
unless
they really
Dad's
are.
money came in a lump sum and was worth like 5 million, who knows? I'm just putting that out there. 'Cause
They
that's
could
something
still
I've
be
seen. But
using that.
he
but-
stopped continuing to give the money.
Yeah.
And I suppose what they're kind of trying to do was deny any justification in any media intrusion. We're not taking taxpayers' money. We're not working members of the royal family. We've set up our own business. We are working with Netflix. We're taking money from them. You've got no justification now to hover, which I don't think there ever was, to be fair, to hover cameras over a house and try and take pictures of Archie.
And a lot of the commentary around this was that this couldn't be a clearer sign that they are done, cut ties
Yes.
with their lives
The divorce.
as working members of the royal family. They're not coming back. Is, you know, lots of people say this is significant because, you know, there are no ties anymore.
Yes, the ties have been well and truly severed.
They have.
So, Harry and Meghan are now setting out as former royals with a very lucrative deal with a private media company, Netflix, living in a mansion which they are funding themselves in Los Angeles, or technically was it Montecito in Santa Barbara. Basically the message is to the press, not just the UK press, but the international press and the American paparazzi who are based in Los Angeles to get out of here, stop taking pictures, stop prying into our private lives.
Yeah, and I think...
Unless, of course, they want to publicise things.
Unless they want to, in a very controlled way. They are still wanting to control how they do that.
Like the Netflix story last week, which we think was given, by their PR outfit, Sunshine State, straight to the New York Times. So,
But I think, while Frogmore is laying empty at the moment, I think Harry said himself, and we understand that they would have come over had it have not been for COVID, and they would have been using it. So I think
presumably he is coming over to Europe for next year's Invictus Games if they're still going ahead.
They're still going ahead, yeah.
In The Hague, in the Netherlands.
You would expect to see him there, but I guess everything is still very up in the air.
Yes. There was another story around about the sort of the level of commitment anyone has to undertake in order to get Harry and Meghan to speak at their events, wasn't there? The big speakers agency that they've signed up with. Again, it's not a story that we've sourced, and we are only reporting what has been out there. But
this is a story that first was in the Telegraph about the kind of list of questions that somebody pitching for Harry and Meghan to speak at their event would have to answer. And the Harry Walker Agency have responded now and said we would do that for any of our clients. But, I think...
It's not particularly unusual, perhaps.
Not unusual. And I suppose
But
Harry
interesting
and
that it was
don't
leaked.
want to be tripped up.
This form, however it got out there, was leaked to someone at the Telegraph. So
this is the form for if they're doing a virtual speaking engagement. But I guess in many ways
the same list of commitments that people have to undertake.
You want to know who the sponsors are, what the dress code is. If they want me to
speak at any event,
who'll be there.
I have an equally exhaustive list of things that people have to adhere to.
But there are a few things next year that would potentially mean that Harry and Meghan could come this side of the pond. We've got the Invictus Games, and then there's the unveiling of the Diana statue in the sunken garden on the 1st of July, Trooping the Colour, the Queen's official birthday, which we had the mini version of this year. There's lots of things. Do they come over for them all? TBC.
Yes. Right.
And before you even ask me, I don't have anything to say. Next week.
You've answered that earlier. Actually, interestingly, I was talking to one of the royal officials this week who said actually that is precisely the reason why they do not pre-announce any visits at the moment, is because they don't want to encourage any crowds of people to come and gather and therefore potentially be breaching guidelines, which in the UK now means you can't have any more than 6 people together in any setting, inside, outside, at home, in a pub, in the streets, anywhere.
We're tightening up again here, aren't we, as the number of cases increases.
We're clamping down. We're still socially distant, and even before we came into the studio, we were allowed 2 people in here at any one time. Remember last week we had to take Maggie Rooley from ABC News into another room and got into lots of trouble with some management because they wanted that room for a meeting. But anyway, thank you for watching. We hope that we provided more variety for those critics who suggested that this podcast last week was too heavily centred on the Sussexes.
But we will
continue. Report what happens, and we will analyse what happens. And last week what happened was Harry and Meghan. This week what happened, potentially significant story with dogs. And
fingers crossed for them.
Yes. I'm going to leave you with a picture, if you're watching this on YouTube, of Asher. He's going to do the goodbyes this week, and we will see you next week. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.